the question is, there's a story in today's LA Times that details how construction in this area, Southern California, has become more non-union, more low-wage over the last 30 or 40 years than it was before. And his question was, given that, might there be ways to intervene in the entertainment industry, which is experiencing comparable wage cuts and loss of jobs, with the notion of a co-op? How would you go about that? Is that happening? It's happening, although from what I know, on a small scale so far. But yes, I think the way to get at it would be a general argument of the sort we could make in many industries. And it goes something like this. Unions weren't always limited in how they understood their role to getting better wages and working conditions for the employee. Or to put it this way, a little bit differently, unions used to say, yes, we're struggling to get higher wages and better working conditions, no question, that's what we do. But we understand as unions that as long as the way we get them is to get a contract signed with an employer that lasts, say, 3 years, which is typical, or some other period of time. Contracts can be written in whatever way the two sides agree on. As long as we do that, we're constantly worried that when the contract is over in 2 years or 3 years, the employer will want to take back whatever it is we were able to win the last time. Indeed, the employer will be working over the life of the contract to set himself up to be in a position when it expires to take back and undo, because that's just the logic of the situation. Every employer would do that. Which means you're never secure. You never, even when you win something, you can't really count on it. You can't buy that house because that's going to be payments for 15 years and your contracts are only for 3. And if it doesn't work out real well, you will not be able to make the mortgage payments and you'll be out on the street, blah, 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 blah. So unions once upon a time understood that and said that our strategy is, as long as there's capitalism and we have to deal with an employer and we may sign contracts, we will do the best we can, but that's not the end because that's not secure. The only way to be secure about the conditions you win with an employer is if you're the employer yourself. Well, it has a beauty to it if you think about it. It's like a piece of music that ends with a nice chord. This is a way to say that there's a natural alliance here between a co-op movement and a labor movement. The labor movement does the best you can within the framework of the system, and the co-op is where you gotta go if you ever want to get out of the insecurities that this system condemns you to. Everybody's gonna understand that. There's no rocket science here. This is the logic of capitalism. And nowadays you have endless stories, such as those in today's Times, to indicate what the risks are, what they will do to get rid of the union altogether, if they can, weaken it if they can't get rid of it, go around it if they can't do the other two. So you're in an endless struggle, which these days you are losing. I mean, you all know, right? For the last 50 years, the union movement is weaker each year than it was the year before. 50 years ago, roughly a third of American workers were in unions. Today, it's about 9 or 10%. That's not, the nicest thing to call that is a disaster. That's a disaster for the unions. In the private sector, it's now less than 7% of workers are in a union. That's a destruction of a union movement. You've kept the game as we fight for better wages and working conditions. That's been your strategy. That hasn't worked. It's not that it's all your fault. It's not just your strategy. You had a lot of opposition from Republicans and Democrats alike. But whatever part of it is your responsibility, sticking with a strategy like that, given what it's done for you, that's nuts. So working with a co-op movement, I mean, you got very little left to lose. I have been with union meetings and union leaders where I've said this. And here's what's happened. And I don't mind saying it to you as honestly as I can. The union leaders agree. They agree with what we're saying. No problem, they get it. They've learned that from their own realities and their own struggles. But when we're done speaking and I say, well, look, here's a way, well, let me give you a concrete example without names. All across America, hospitals are closing in poor neighborhoods. Why? Very simple. If a hospital is located in a poor neighborhood, often an African American or Hispanic American, poor neighborhood, they depend on Medicaid and Medicare, old people, reimbursements. The level of reimbursement that the federal government gives for Medicaid and Medicare is crappy. You all know that, or you should. So hospitals can't survive when they get paid on those scales that come from the federal government for Medicaid, that's low income, and Medicare over 65, right? So for a hospital to survive, it has to rely on people with private insurance, people who work for an employer who provides private insurance, or people who are rich enough to pay the bill themselves out of their own money. So that's what hospitals are doing in America, trying to get the people who have insurance on the job or who are rich, which leaves the hospitals in poor areas. I give you an example in New York City. In poor neighborhoods, people who have, the few who have insurance at the job, are approached by hospitals in other boroughs, typically Manhattan, who say, if you get sick, call us. We will send an ambulance to your home on the spot to pick you up and bring us to Manhattan, which is an hour drive, rather than to go to your local hospital, which is 10 minutes away. Then something happens which I particularly enjoy. It's the visit to the local mayor, because there's a conversation there that I guarantee you is one of the great moments of your life. You're sitting, imagine this, you're sitting across the big oak panel desk of Mr. Mayor or Mr. Congressman or Mr. or Ms. whatever. And you say, look, we're doing this. We're going to convert this hospital into a co-op. And that's going to take care of a lot of our costs, because we're not going to have this army of highly paid hospital administrators. We're going to save on that. But, you know, it's going to be rough to make it. So we need something, Mr. Mayor. We need no taxes to pay. We need a nice fat subsidy. We need this, we need this, we need this. Now, if you give that to us, Mr. Mayor, we will run around this community saying, you saved the hospital. You saved the jobs. You are Jesus Christ in a new shape. That's not the best part. Here comes the best part. And Mr. Mayor, if you don't, you'll never be elected to anything. Yes. Because we will go around this community and we will explain. You would have had a hospital. You would have had a job if this mayor didn't screw you to the wall. Be sure not to vote for him next Thursday. You understand? I never have to go to that last part in any detail. I begin to talk there, and the mayor looks at me, his eyes go down, and he knows exactly, because all we're doing is what is done to him by every other industry in the area every third Thursday anyway. It's only what's new is we're playing that game, not them. He has to give it to us. Otherwise, he's out of there. You understand? These are one of the ways in which the co-op becomes a politically powerful game. It can solve real problems in communities and make it impossible, even for the most venal politician, to turn away, because it's too dangerous for them to turn away. As this system cannot solve its problems, we become able to intervene with a kind of solution that even if they don't like it, they don't have a solution. That is a new game for which they're not prepared. which gives us that element of surprise that's very useful. And the look on those politicians' face when you said it to them, I guarantee you, you will remember that moment all your life. So I think that's what we do. We go and we say, look what's happening to you. Look what's happening to you. You don't want to be outdone by non-union. I mean, you got to deal with this situation. In New York City, by the way, the same thing is happening. The construction unions there have a tactic. I don't know if any of you have seen this. They have an enormous, I kid you not, an enormous gray rat. But it's made up out of, it's air, you blow it up, it's like a balloon in the shape of a very ugly looking big rat. And wherever there's a struggle between a union and an construction type struggle, they have the big rat. And then there are people handing out flyers denouncing whoever the employer is for being a big rat. It has, I mean, it's very dramatic, it's nice, you get your picture in the TV, it's good. But it's not enough. It's just not enough, and there it is. It's a problem that the unions have for which their standard solutions haven't worked, which is the argument, the opening for us. Well, what about if the unions stop functioning that way? What about if they begin to organize co-ops with groups like ours that work at that, who want that, who support that, who can mobilize the community? By the way, you know the role for Democracy at Work was with that hospital business? We were saying that what we would do, I mean, we don't know how to run a hospital, so we're not offering to do that. We're not competent to do that. But what we're good at is we know how to mobilize a community politically. We know how to put out the PR. We know how to put people up on television to talk about why this is a solution. And that frees up other people, the nurses union, who, by the way, were the strongest supporters of this. That is a very progressive union, particularly here in California, but it is everywhere. In New York also, the New York State, nurses are very good about all of this. They, more than SEIU or 1199, if you know the other unions that are in this space, they have their work to do to make such a thing work. And our job would be the mobilization, politically, ideologically. We're the ones who will design the leaflets that are handed out at the subway stops to explain to the community what this is about and why this is important and why it's not just important to save the hospital, but part of a movement to change America. There again, that vision that we offer makes this, well, I put it this way in one of my meetings with the union. You all remember, you union activists, you all remember, because you show movies at your union meetings about how the union movement in the 1930s wasn't just a movement to help workers, it was a movement to make a better America. It was, the unions were the leaders for a social movement. You remember with nostalgia, well, this is your chance to do that again. If the unions become advocates of a cooperativization of the American economy, the democratization of enterprises, you're not just helping your members get another buck. You're a social movement again. And if you're allied with immigrant groups and if you're allied with others, in that image I gave you before, you're now a component, a key component of a social movement. You have your chance to capture again what you had in the 30s. Don't let that slip by. For many of these leaders, they get nostalgic at that moment because they haven't seen those movies 100 times. They want to go back. They really do on some level. But we're the first ones to offer them a way to do it. And they're dying because they're now looked upon, even by their own members, as the deliverers of a higher wage. And if you can't do that, then who needs you? And why am I paying you dues? That's not a social movement mentality. That's a service mentality, and the unions are killed by that. Anyway, that's how I would, yeah.
The electoral division is very exciting. What you mentioned about the party, it's a different way of thinking about it. If you've spoken about this elsewhere, have people then responded? So, well, we've got Bernie's Our Revolution, we've got the Green. Your reflections on existing progressive electoral initiatives and parties and so on, and how this might work with or beyond or supplement. How do you see the configuration here?
Sure. I see something evolving here in the United States. Occupy is a major break for me. You know, I think we all ought to take our hats off to Occupy. That was a breakthrough that we will understand more and more as the years go by how important that little or not so little thing was. And the important thing about it was, for the first time in 50 years, a left-wing political movement put the economic issues right up front. The 1% versus the 99% was their defining slogan. Up until that time, whether it was anti-racist or anti-imperialist or anti-sexist or whatever, or anti, you know, pro-ecological, all of those movements had terrible struggles inside among those who said, don't go near that economic stuff because you'll be branded a communist, a socialist, all of that. And so they were very careful to, the Occupy, half not aware of what they were doing, dismissed all of that. We're putting that 1% versus 99 right up front. Breakthrough. Major, without understanding it, they were saying it's now possible to say that stuff again the way it was before World War II. We can do it, and we can get away with it, and it won't be the end. And everybody held their breath, even those who didn't understand what they were doing, and we all saw the world didn't end. In a matter of weeks, in 300 cities, there are little tent encampments on the downtown green or whatever it was, where people, it all worked. It was okay. It was, the President of the United States started using 1%, 99%, as if it had become normalized. This is a fantastic transformation given this country's history. And the result of that was, there's no way you could have had Bernie without that. For a man to say, I'm a socialist, granted he's the most moderate socialist you can possibly be. But of course that makes sense. You want the first one to make the breakthrough, to make it okay to be a socialist, should be a kindly, old, gray-haired man from Vermont, you know. Of course, you know. The only other person who could have pulled that off would be, I don't know, Susan Sarandon or something, right? Because who's that going to be upset? You know, everyone likes her. Or the other one that Trump attacked, I forget her name. Meryl Streep. It could have been her. You know, someone like that. So I think Occupy, Bernie, and now we're another step. That's all. What I'm telling you, this vision of a party, that's the next step of all of this. So I thank them. They were conditions for us to take a step. Now we're taking a step. Others will hear what we're saying and take it yet others. To answer your question, yes, I'm beginning to say this in a variety of circumstances, including publicly. I will be talking about this on the radio. Oh, that reminds me, someone said earlier something about Lumio. What is it about?
Yeah, we have a workshop with them the first week of May.
Okay, if you listen this Sunday to my radio program here, I interview Richard Bartlett of Lumio, talking all about it. So if you're interested, you can learn about it. He explains all of that there and why he wants to build worker co-ops all over the world, which he's doing from his base in New Zealand, where he comes from. He's traveling the United States now for 10 weeks. He's going to be here. He's giving workshops, and it's very interesting. And we have a lot of connections with New Zealand and Australia. A lot of interest there in what we do and so on. So yeah, this idea is that, look, this is an evolution of something is happening in America, and we're a leaf carried on a stream that is becoming a raging river, and it's kind of overwhelming, and you know, the leaf can get brushed aside, but it's something very organic that's going on here, and we're just another step in this. But you know, it's our job. We're trying to be very self-conscious. To talk about a new political party is a very big step. And in order for that not to be just noise, it has to have a clear idea of what it is and how it's different from other parties. Otherwise, we're going to have, and I don't mean this as a criticism, But we can't go the route of declaring yet another party. A lot of people on the left have done that 100 times, and we don't know much about it because they are mushrooms. They come up after the rain and then they disappear. Or they don't disappear, they just act as if they had disappeared. And a lot of these parties are just for people trying to keep alive a newsletter. I understand that. I'm not critical. It's better that they do that than it isn't done. But in order to really make this, you've got to have a way to define. The first question any American's going to ask us is, how and why is your party any different from other parties? We have to answer that. That's a very correct question for anybody to ask us. And we have to have a really good answer. This is who we are. This is why we think a party is necessary. This is what this party is going to do that the Republicans and Democrats are never going to do for you. We can answer those questions. And that's a result of Occupy and Bernie and everything that's happened. We can now answer that question, which means we're getting closer to being able to do it.
Because our party is unleavened.
What?
Because our party is unleavened.
Yes. At least not leavened by the usual. Yeah.
Even with a clear vision, how do we avoid all the normal pitfalls that plague third-party policies?
Yes, good question. How do we avoid them? Well, again, I'm so taken with the fact that we actually can now answer the question, why do you need a new party? We can do that because what the other parties are not doing and will not do, how we will proceed, what will we can answer a whole lot of questions. So I'm very excited that we can do that. Have we answered all the questions? No, and yours is a perfectly good one. How do we deal with the ways in which the two parties that now dominate this society have worked things out to maintain their domination? Well, this new party will have to face those. Let's start with an example. Proportional representation. In this country, you know, we have winner-take-all elections. You get 51% of the vote, you get the position, and the people, the political party that got 49% of the vote gets nothing. It lost. You are aware, I hope, that in most European countries, for example, they don't work like that. If you get 10% of the vote in an election, for example, in Germany or France or Italy, then you get 10% of the seats in Congress. You don't disappear. The notion is if 10% of the people want this party, they want those people that talk like that to be in a position to write the laws. Otherwise, you're disenfranchising those 10%. You're excluding their view from lawmaking because they didn't get more than 50%, which is bizarre. The Europeans think that it's very undemocratic to run elections the way we do, just in case you never heard of it before. By the way, in the United States, we have proportional representation. We have it now, and we've had it in the past. So there's no question that we could have it again. For example, in many states, I don't know how California works, in the primaries, the candidate who gets 42% of the vote gets 42% of the delegates to the convention. That's proportional representation. Remember how Bernie and Clinton got various percentages in various states, and they got corresponding. That's all proportional representation is. Let me give you another example. In the late 1940s, in New York City, for the city council, they had proportional representation, not in the primary, in the general election. And the United States Communist Party, based in New York City, ran a candidate. He was a black man, an African American named Benjamin Davis. And the Communist Party got enough votes that he went on to the city council. How many of you knew that in 1948, a black communist sat on the city council of New York by virtue of proportional representation? A few of you did, but too few. Too few. And he introduced very important legislation. He was the most progressive. By the way, it did more for the Communist Party in New York City than anything they had done before. It gave them support in the black community, it gave them support in the Hispanic community, it gave them support in the white working class community because of the things Benjamin Davis said. He was a leader, he was a hero. He was the only one who talked like this. And they all had to get together, the Republicans and Democrats, to destroy him afterwards, and then they got rid of proportional representation, so that didn't happen again. But we have a history in it. We could change all this. Just as we changed proportional to non, we could change it back again. And that would be a very important step for a third party like ours, because it would mean that if we can get 5% or 10% of the votes, we are on the city council. And let me drive home to you what that means. In New York City, in Madison, Wisconsin, and there are other places, but I don't know where they all are. Well, actually here in Richmond in California, this is happening too. There's an effort to get the city councils to pass ordinances, to pass bills at the city level, to provide money to support worker co-ops. In New York City, they've appropriated several millions of dollars, which have been given to organizations that provide all kinds of supports to worker co-ops. Madison, Wisconsin appropriated $5 million. Madison is much smaller than New York, but they appropriated $5 million. Now, I understand New York is a unique place, Madison is a unique place, but this is very interesting. And on a city level, you're already big enough right now in this room for a coordinated effort to begin to mobilize to do that. You get 1 or 2 city council members to begin to move in this direction. They might be willing, if you are all a support for that, if you would have some meetings, if you would hand out some leaflet, if you would begin to do the kinds of things, you could then get, you know, these are all interesting. You could go to a person like Kshama Sawant up in Seattle and ask her and her people to, at least in principle, they should be supportive. You weren't all at this last night. The British Labour Party is a perfect example of how far this has already gotten. So if you're not aware of this, let me tell you. The British Labour Party, the number 2 party in Great Britain, the British Labour Party has made the following commitment. If elected, they will pass a law that says the following: any existing business in Great Britain, whether it's an office, a store, a factory, any kind of business, can stay as it is as long as it wants to stay in that form. But if it gets to any of the following situations: 1, it wants to close down, for whatever reason. Or number 2, it wants to sell itself to another company, for whatever reason. Or number 3, it wants to become a publicly owned company, that is, issue shares and become a stockholder company from being its own. If any of those options are on the table for a company, it must, by law, provide what's called a right of first refusal to its own workers to buy the company and convert it into a co-op. That will be the law. But here's the best part. It's not just that. Because the question you will all have is, where would they get the money? To which the British Labour answers with a smile: the government will lend it to them. Yeah. Now, for those of you who don't know your history, that is how in the past transitions like this have made. When in Russia, before the revolution, when Russia ended feudalism, which was only about 1850, when Russia ended feudalism, the way it was done was that the Russian government, this is how the capitalists emerging in Russia did it. Your feudal manor is over. You have to release your serfs. There is no more feudalism. But the way we'll handle that is, we will buy your feudal manor from you with government money. There are many precedents like that. There were people here in the United States, for those of you who don't know your history, there were people in the United States at the time of the Civil War who wanted slavery to be ended by the federal government buying all the black slaves and then liberating them. But the decision made by Lincoln and his advisors was, why should we pay them? Let's just have a manifesto, the Emancipation Proclamation, and in one whoop, that's it, you're done. By the way, this was an act of the expropriation of private property. You live in a country that said to all of those people who were slave owners, who had paid good money to buy slaves, we don't care that you paid good money. We don't care that that's all your wealth. As of tomorrow morning, you have nothing. That's what Lenin and Stalin did that time in October back then in Russia. You have a factory? Ha, you don't. Not tomorrow, you don't. You had it yesterday. Tomorrow, you got nothing. But people who think that this is a Russian specialty, no. That's what we did. That's how we got rid of it. But that's not how all societies do it. In Russia, they bought them out. The British proposal is to buy out the capitalists by lending money at a very low interest rate to the workers so that they can exercise their right of first refusal. This is a way, not as fast as I would like it, but it is a way of building a worker co-op sector pretty soon in historical time, because it's basically saying, you're all on borrowed time, you businesses, because sooner or later you're going to be in one of these situations where you're going to have to give your workers the right to convert it, and we're going to provide the capital to make it happen. Is this doable in the United States? Of course it is. Doable by state, doable by federal. Folks, this is not a technical problem. How to do this, we know all that. From other experiences, from just using our heads. This is only a political problem, the way these things always are. Can we mobilize the people to want this and push for it? Then we get it. Technology, how to do it, these are details we'll figure out, if they haven't already been.
So before, we have like 5 minutes.
Okay.
We're running out of time, so hopefully a short question and a relatively short answer.
All right, I will work at that. Why don't you do this?
You want me-
Yeah.
Steve?
Yeah, I actually had a couple of quick things. One is, have you talked to Socialist Alternatives? Because I know part of their platform, having read through, it's really good, is support for worker co-ops. And then the other thing is, there was mention of the film industry, and wouldn't it be cool if we could have the ability to create a film that is a worker co-op based film that was from the bottom up, organized and produced by a co-op.
Yeah, the answer about have we talked to other left groups in the United States, in a casual way, yes. In a systematic way, not at all. And the reason for that is even those who say something about worker co-ops make very few references, and they're very general. And we're kind of beyond that. I mean, we agree with we're glad they say that, we support that, and we encourage it. But this is what we focus on. We've done a lot more. So I'm a little embarrassed to have to tell you the story of the British Labour Party because they're so far ahead of anything in this country. We've adopted for Democracy at Work, I speak about this Labour Party thing because they did the work. I can take that and use it and explain it here and explain it in the United States, and people nod and they're excited. Of course, it's better to explain it by saying that a major political party in a country like England is already there, has already adopted this at their convention as their official party policy and what they offer the British people, who are going to have an election on the 8th of June. So it's going to be in the air, all this stuff in England, as part of the life of that society over the next 6 weeks. So it's going to be real, much more real to the British people than it is to the Americans, because it's part of what the official party is. But we don't have anything like that in this country. I mean, to my knowledge, we're the only one who have run with that ball as far as we have already. We hope that they will be interested and we can collaborate with them, and we're absolutely in favor of that. But there's not much to talk about now. If you look at Bernie, it's the same thing. Bernie has a line in his platform, there should be more cooperatives. Oh, okay, that's nice, but that doesn't help us very much. I mean, I'm glad it's there, but it doesn't.
You're talking about having a political party to do it. There is a party that's already somewhat interested, and maybe they become a vehicle.
Part of it, absolutely.
Well, the Democratic Socialist Organization, because I've talked to people, they're not involved in the electoral process. They're involved in advocacy and education. And the Green Party actually has the infrastructure.
Yes.
Michael Feinstein told me that over 300 candidates have actually been, he himself is one, for mayor of San Jose and Santa Monica, have been elected into office in this country. So they have an infrastructure that has worked at least 300 times. So just FYI.
Yeah. No, I think at this point, our hope is to develop the logic, the arguments, the materials, but then to have conversations if when we get to the point of a political organization that we try to do, to sit down with all of these other formations to talk about working something out. Absolutely. I mean, I don't mind saying I was asked to help the Green Party on many occasions over the last few years, and I've done that in each case. They're not the only people who reached out to us either, although I'm not clear about what I can or cannot say about the others, but you can all guess.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay? Yeah.
I think we have to call it, guys. I'm really sorry, but yeah, it's coming to the end, so let's thank Richard Wolff.